Here we go with some good multiple choice questions in the cost accounting concepts realm. Let's begin. If a product required a great deal of electricity to produce and crude oil prices increased, which of the following costs most likely increased? All right, first step I want to bring to your attention is we see direct materials, direct labor, prime cost, conversion costs. We've got a lot of formulas that I want to bring to your attention. These should all be memorized, and if they're not memorized, you have time, no worries, you can memorize them. All right. Well, first, product costs. Product costs, another name for that is cost of goods manufactured. I'll refer to that as COGM. And cost of goods manufactured, that's going to be your direct materials, direct labor, and manufacturing overhead. Definitely formulas to memorize because you'll have conceptual questions on them and you'll have actual mathematical based questions on them. You see here, just to reiterate, product costs, another name for that is cost of goods manufactured, and both of those equal direct materials plus direct labor plus manufacturing overhead. It's a mouthful sometimes, it's a lot of words. All right, next, conversion costs equal direct labor and manufacturing overhead. Another kind of colloquial way to say this is, what is the cost to convert the material to a finished good? Well, that's labor and overhead. Prime costs. Prime costs, what costs are more directly attributable to that particular product? Direct materials and direct labor. But you can kind of understand it. At the end of the day, you really just need to memorize it. All of these for sure have memorized here in your mind. Super important and definitely a baseline cost accounting, right? Like, really would memorize this before moving forward. Okay, which of the following costs most likely increased? So if I was taking the test, I'd write out all these formulas because these are your weapons, right? This is your ammunition to tackle this question. Okay, great deal of electricity to produce. Now, electricity, that doesn't sound like a direct material or a direct labor. That sounds more like an overhead because utilities, as we'll see and as we know, utilities fall into overhead. Materials, that's metal and rope and, right, everything, wood, everything that falls in rubber. Labor are your actual hourly wage people, right? Overhead could include salaried administrative people. And since we know this is a utility, right? Electricity is a utility. It only falls under manufacturing overhead, so it can't be prime cost because there's no overhead in prime cost. It can't be direct labor, can't be direct materials. The only viable answer here is going to be letter A, conversion costs, because that includes overhead. Great, awesome. The best way to know that, again, would have been to memorize these formulas. Practice, practice. You are doing well. Next up, which of the following costs includes all the product costs? Again, I'm going to paste our formulas in here. Memorize all the way. Well, we know product costs equal materials, labor, and overhead. Now, this is trying to trip us up a little bit by including conversion costs and prime costs, but we know that prime cost is material and labor, and conversion costs is labor and overhead. Don't let that trip you up. We need an answer that has all three. So manufacturing overhead and conversion costs, nope, that's double counting overhead and not mentioning materials. What about direct material and conversion costs? Well, that seems to have all three, right? Material and conversion costs is labor and overhead. Let's keep reading. C, direct labor and conversion costs, that's double counting labor and does not include material. And labor and prime costs, again, double counting labor and does not include overhead. The only answer that has all three of our main types of costs is going to be letter B. Great conceptual questions to make sure you have down. This might seem basic, might seem like, why aren't we getting a little bit more tricky? This is just so radically important for you to understand before moving on to anywhere. I really want to make sure you have this down, and hopefully you do. If not, we'll keep running through questions. Okay, the benefits and limitations of both absorption and variable costing can be tied to an important factor. Absorption costing is blank, and variable costing is blank. All right, so encouraged by who, permitted by who, not permitted by who? Well, let's see. Okay, Do we care particularly about the IRS? Generally not in this exam, right? Generally not. However, we do have a listing of descriptors and factors of each of these methods. And variable costing is not allowed by the IRS. However, I don't see anything there about that, right? It says encouraged by the IRS. So actually, because of that, variable costing is not allowed by the IRS, so it's not going to be letter B, right? Okay. And all of the criteria, this will be more in the lesson, so feel free to go back and take a look if if you don't have the criteria memorized or those descriptors memorized yet. Feel free to go back, take a look. And variable costing as well is not allowed under US GAAP. So permitted under US GAAP, permitted under US GAAP. I, again, would cross off letter A and letter C. So we could have figured that out just based on variable costing. However, yeah, absorption costing is for sure. It's permitted under US GAAP. These are two costing methods. Memorize all the way, right? I would just turn this into a big memorization game. You're going to make your brain a textbook, and that's going to give you free points in the exam. If you can just memorize these, put these on flashcards, rewrite this from memory, all of the descriptors and the facts that are important about each criteria and each method, you will do super well. All right, we'll keep moving on. Which of the following can be considered a cost pool? Well, before we even consider the question, what the heck is a cost pool? If you remember, if you're familiar, a cost pool is it's a grouping of individual costs, typically by department or service center. So that might be, let's say we're Tesla, all right, the big Tesla, right? We've got different departments. We've got accounting, we've got manufacturing. It doesn't really matter, AM. It could just be department 1, department 2, etc. We got operations. And so usually we are going to group our costs by service center or department. So we've got our group A, group M, group O right here. Those cost pools, these are commonly used to allocate factory overhead to units of production. It's required by our accounting framework to do this. These also are generally going to be used in activity-based costing, our cost pools. We've got a cost pool A, cost pool M, cost pool O. And these cost pools are allocated into these different departments. Now, which of these are considered cost pools? Give you a second to think about it. If you're not familiar, no worries, I'll dive right in. It is actually going to be both. And here, these cost pools, we will have the cost pool, like the total costs of materials and the total costs of labor that all fall within Department A. We'll have that again for M and then have that again for Department O. So we have our grouping, right? These are our groupings of costs. That's materials, and that's labor. We allocate, right? We use these in activity-based costing to allocate. These cost managers, or these are the allocation drivers, right? Cost drivers, and these are our cost pools. Super important to keep in mind. Just this is conceptual. We will see a lot more math based on this. We'll see more, but start to get familiar with what is a cost pool, what's a cost driver, what are the materials that go in, where do utilities fall in line, what's considered overhead. All of these are super important questions that will build your foundation for cost accounting. Spend time here. I hated cost accounting in school. I can't imagine you were a fan either. Although I do work with many people who enjoy it, and God bless them, but that is not me, and might be you, might not be you. But do your best. Do your best. All of these sections are great places to get points. You don't have to love it, but if you get good at it, you'll start to love it. And that's a great point as well, is you may hate this right now, but generally human beings like things that they're good at. If you get really good at cost accounting, I can probably guarantee you're going to like it because you can show off and get free points with it, and you'll do well. The better you get at each topic here, the more you'll like it, the easier it gets. It's a compounding exponential growth of studying. Keep working hard. I know you are, right? But work a little bit harder. Push yourself. I'm here with you. I went through it. You are going to get through this exam and be able to look back and celebrate. So great job, everyone, and I'll see you next time. Hey there! Are you ready to not only pass your CPA exams, but truly understand and enjoy the material while studying? I know it seems impossible, right? Especially to enjoy the material? We'll do it together. Tap into the power of CPA.examprep.ai, where we've got personalized quizzes, multiple choice questions, memorization guides, flashcards, simulations, all tailored to your learning. Our adaptive study planning puts you on the fastest path to success and lifts you back up if you fall behind. Avoid wasting your precious time and money attempting an exam with a low chance of passing, because who wants that? We want to get you through this process as quick as possible. Our exam readiness prediction lets you walk in with confidence, knowing that you're prepared for success on exam day. Thankfully, there's no payment method needed to get started, so why don't you come join us? Visit cpa.examprep.ai and let's achieve your exam success together.